Hello, everyone, and welcome to StoryForge, an offshoot of the Untold Stories project. This project focuses on those role-playing systems that may not get a whole lot of view in the streaming community. StoryForge specifically is meant to focus on character creation within these systems. My name is Andy, and I will be your Forge Master for this series, so let's strike while the iron is hot. This week's episode is going to focus on Werewolf: The Apocalypse. Not a system that I'm overly familiar with, so I've brought in one of the players from our Born of Rage series, Aaron, to kind of explain what Werewolf is and how he went about making his character for the Born of Rage project. So, Aaron, great to have you here.
Happy to be here.
All right, so if you wouldn't mind going ahead and kind of explaining what is Werewolf and what makes it unique?
Okay, so Werewolf: The Apocalypse is a part of, it was originally White Wolf. The license has now traveled to Onyx Publishing and Paradox Entertainment, who are in control of the video game for the entire World of Darkness setting. But originally, Werewolf was the second game that was created as part of their World of Darkness setting. The first one, which is probably better known to most people, is Vampire the Masquerade. And then they brought in Werewolf: The Apocalypse. The universe that they created for Werewolf is a very dense universe. Like the 30-second pitch doesn't exist because werewolves are spiritual creatures who they travel between the physical world and the spirit world. They are born werewolves. They do not become werewolves. And there are 13 different tribes of werewolf, and then werewolves are further defined by what moon phase they were born under. And the more you dig into the spiritual elements of the game, the more dense, more complex it gets, which is part of the reason why our game master for Born of Rage, Jonesy, started us off as newly turned werewolves who are going through their rite of passage. Even though werewolves are born, not made, you don't always know you're a werewolf. One day, you get overcome with your rage, and that's what triggers your first transformation. At that point, other werewolves find you, bring you in, and start to give you Werewolf 101. And then you do a rite of passage, which is kind of your trial by fire to prove that you are worthy of being a part of the tribe, part of the local area sept. And like I said, it's a lot to absorb. So Jonesy decided that he's going to back up from where most werewolf games start, which is after you've gone through your rite of passage. And he's running us through as if we are you basically know nothing, which is great because most of the players know nothing. And also this is a good way that we're able to introduce the cosmology and the setting and all of the varied antagonists to the audience of the game, instead of, because like if you tune in to watch, say, a D&D or a Pathfinder podcast, even if you don't know the specifics of the setting, most people kind of understand, okay, so there's elves and there's dwarves and there's magic and there's some weird polytheistic gods. Werewolf is a whole different ballgame. So there's a lot of, let's ease you into this as you get to learn as our characters are learning and as our players are learning.
Perfect. And that's a great way to kind of get everybody used to the system, not only from a player perspective, but also from the audience perspective, because they get to learn with you guys as things are going.
Yep. And I think I'm the only one of our players who has actually played Werewolf before. So it works out nicely.
Many iterations of Werewolf.
Yeah. So again, because like 10 years after White Wolf started the World of Darkness, they ended it. They had the big world changing, everyone dies ending, and then they created a new World of Darkness. So there's another Werewolf game put out by White Wolf called Werewolf the Forsaken, which was the more recent version of Werewolf. But then they put out all of the classic World of Darkness for the 20th anniversary, and that's the version that we're playing.
Awesome. Cool. So. And so you are playing Kennedy Donovan, right?
Yes.
All right. talk a little
So,
bit about Kennedy before we kind of show everybody how you made her.
sure. So, because of how we set up our characters, and again, like I said, we were designed to be, you're just going through your rite of passage. None of us created characters the way that you might if you were playing already. I'm phrasing this badly. Rather than come up with the idea of a werewolf and, what powers you're going to have and what your role in werewolf society was, all of us started with a person. If you were playing in a game where the assumption was everyone already knew the setting and had gone through their rite of passage, you might want to do something that is more focused on, okay, I'm building a werewolf. I'm building someone who's going to be in this tier of werewolf society and focus on this kind of supernatural gift. And one of the things for werewolves is they can be born either a human or a wolf, or there are some cases where you are born a werewolf because both of your parents were werewolves, although those characters they have a lower tier in society. Like I said, we weren't building fully realized werewolves. We were starting with a character, with a person who then finds out they're a werewolf. So for my character, Kennedy Donovan, I decided that I wanted to play an Irish dancer. And I did this because partially my daughter is an Irish dancer. So I thought, well, that could be kind of fun to play something based around, my daughter's sport. So Kennedy was a 18-year-old girl who was from Dublin, Ireland. She was competing in Worlds, or she was supposed to be competing in Worlds, the night of her first transformation. And after her first transformations, she ended up finding herself in an alleyway covered in blood of several of her friends and some people who were harassing them on the streets of New York City. So she's had to give up her dream of being an Irish dance champion. So that's kind of where I started with the idea of who Kennedy was.
Great. It's always a good idea to start with a really good kind of background story before you delve deep into something especially as heavy as Werewolf is from a character background perspective, because having the character background then will inform kind of the decisions you're going to make when choosing skills and whatnot. So,
Absolutely.
All right. So with that said, I think let's go ahead and swap over to the character sheets and let's see how you built her.
Here I have a blank character sheet for Werewolf. This is actually a blank character sheet from the Roll20 website because I couldn't find a good form fillable PDF. So probably the easiest way to go is just work from start at the top of the character sheet and work our way down. Yep. There is a checklist in the rule book, but it basically goes the same process of start at the top and work your way down.
Makes sense.
So I have a name. Her name's Kennedy. And then the first thing that I came up with was her concept, which was angry former Irish dance champion.
The angry is probably very important there, isn't it?
It is very important. And it's not just important because it defines her backstory, but that is something that all werewolves have in common. They get their power partially from their rage, which ties in nicely to the name of our game, Rage. All right, so she's got a name. She's got a player. That's me. She's got a chronicle, which is Born of Rage. Then the next things that matter are this column right here, which is breed, auspice, and tribe. So breed, like I said, you could be born as a human, which means you're a homid. You could be born as a wolf, which means you are a lupus. Or you could be the offspring of two werewolves, meaning you were born directly in your werewolf form, and you are a metis. For our game, because we all started with people who then found out that they were werewolves, all of us were homids.
Made it nice and simple.
Yep. That choice of breed is going to affect two things later on in character creation. The amount of gnosis, which is your character's spiritual energy, is based on your breed. Homids have the weakest connection to the spirit world. wolves have the strongest. The born werewolves, the metis, are in the middle. So when we get down to Gnosis, that starting number is based on my breed. So because I was a Hamid, I have 1 Gnosis to begin with. Also, the supernatural powers, the gifts, everyone starts with 3 gifts, 1 chosen by your breed, 1 chosen by your auspice, and 1 chosen by your tribe. So when we get to gifts, I will have to take 1 gift from the Hamid selections.
Okay, makes sense.
So then the next thing is auspice, and auspice is the phase of the moon that your character was born under. That will determine your starting rage, and it also determines your place in werewolf society. So the new moons are called Ragabash. They have lowest rage of 1, and their role in society are tricksters. Then there's the crescent moon, who are the Theurges. The half moons, who are the the Theurges are the mystics, the seers. Then the half moons are the Philodoxes. They're the judges, the arbiters. The gibbous moon, or almost full moons, are the Galliards. They are the storytellers, the bards, the memory of the werewolves. And the full moons are the Arunes, or the warriors, the ones whose job above all things is to fight. All werewolves can fight, because all werewolves are capable of turning into 8-foot-tall rage monsters. But the Arunes are especially gifted at it, and they're supposed to be the ones who lead the pack into battle.
Okay.
So because I knew that Kennedy was going to be, she was a dancer, she was she was all about expressing herself, I decided that I was going to make her a Galliard. That also worked out well, because Galliards have the 4th highest starting rage. And again, part of my concept of Kennedy was angry. She's an angry girl. Even before she was a werewolf, she was angry. She would get into fights at school and whatnot. So yeah, her auspice is Galliard. Like I said, also, in addition to the starting rage, when we get to gifts, I have to choose one of my first gifts from the Galliard list.
Yep.
And then finally, our tribe. And tribes are extensive. There are 13 tribes of werewolves. Actually, there were more. There are still 13 tribes of werewolves. Going through all of those is probably more than we want to get into on this. So I'll just say, in my choice, because, again, she's an Irish dance champion, and she was from Dublin originally, I made her part of the Fianna tribe, which are werewolves who all come from Ireland. They also have a connection to the Fae and the fairy world.
So our tribe's world-based, city-based, kind of all throughout the thing. So you could have a tribe of from the Southwest Americas type of thing. Yeah.
So there are some tribes that are very much based on, okay, these are people from a specific culture, a specific part of the world. Mm-hmm. So the Fianna, or there's the Geta Fenris, who are all Germanic, or the Wendigo, who are all Northern America. But then there are also some tribes that don't necessarily have a geographical connection. Like the Glasswalkers are all werewolves who actually enjoy being a part of the city and use technology.
Okay.
So some tribes are based on a real world culture part of the world. Others are just based on a concept.
Right. So. But it kind of gives you that breadth of experience that you can kind of choose from when you're looking to choose a tribe. You can be raised in that culture, or you can be raised within normal human society almost.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, perfect.
And they do make a point that tribes aren't necessarily something that you have to be, just because your werewolf family comes from a certain tribe. It is possible that when your character goes through their first change, they might find a different tribe that is really where they belong. So, there is a tribe that is all women called the Black Furies. So you could easily be I was Kennedy could have been a Black Fury easily. She could have been, yeah, I'm Irish, I have Irish blood, and I might even have family who are Fianna, but this tribe feels more like my home.
Right.
So.
Okay.
But I went with Fianna because I like the Fianna. They're fun.
There you go. That's what it's all about, is making something that you're comfortable with, that you have fun with.
Yep. All right, so the next step for building a character is picking your attributes. So the core mechanic of all of the storyteller games is anything that you're going to do, you're going to make a dice pool based on your attributes and your abilities. Attributes are, your ability score. Abilities are your skills, your talents, and your knowledges. So if you were trying to punch someone, you would roll, say, the amount of your dexterity plus the amount of your brawl.
Mm-hmm.
You'd roll that many d10, and the game master would tell you what the difficulty is. Usually the difficulty is 6. So you would roll a number of dice based on your dice pool, and you'd look for how many of them were 6 or higher, and you would count those as your successes.
Mm-hmm.
If you roll 1s, those are failures and actually take away from your successes. Mm-hmm. So if I say I was rolling 7 dice and I got, 4 successes but 1, I would end up with a total of 3 successes instead.
Yep, that makes sense.
You do get the ability, once you have 4 or more ranks in a ability, to specialize. And if you have a specialization, then 10s become exploding dice. So if you had 4 dots or 4 ranks in an ability and you rolled a 10, you would keep that success and then you'd roll another die and possibly get more successes. So
there you go. Exploding dice are always fun in any game system.
They are. Now, the tricky part is it's very difficult, not impossible, but it's tricky to start with any ability at 4 points or higher in this game system. Although there are some abilities that require you to take a specialization. And we'll get to that as we go down through the list of them.
Yep.
So
physical, social, and mental. I'm assuming you get a number of points to put into each set there.
Exactly. So they split the attributes into 3 categories: physical, social, mental. And then you have to prioritize those categories to decide how many points you will put in each category. So like and you get 7 points for your primary, 5 points for your secondary, and 3 points for your tertiary.
Okay.
So in Kennedy's case, because my concept of her was, a dance champion, I decided that her physical attributes were going to be her highest. So
that makes sense for the character.
Absolutely. So I put 1, 2 dots in her strength, giving her a strength of 3. 2 dots in her stamina, giving her a stamina of 3. And then 3 dots in her dexterity. So she has a dexterity of 4, a strength, and a stamina of 3. She's very graceful. She's got more endurance than the average person, so she can keep dancing all day long. And she just has good musculature. I could have justified maybe keeping her strength at 2, which would be an average, and giving her more dexterity. But again, my concept of her was she's an angry girl who got in fights a lot. So I figured she would have the ability to punch someone and make it stick.
Makes sense to me.
So then for her secondary attributes, I decided that I was going to go with her social. In this case, the 3 attributes are charisma, manipulation, and appearance. And I have 5 points to put in these. So I decided that Kennedy was not unlikable, so I gave her 2 points in charisma and then 3 points in both manipulation and appearance. Manipulation isn't necessarily bad. Like, it's not necessarily like, oh, look how manipulative and conniving I am. But it is your ability to be persuasive, your ability to convince people things, your ability to make people feel things. And again, with her being a dancer, I felt like it made sense to keep her manipulation higher than her charisma.
Yep.
And her appearance, I gave her a 3 because dance is a visual medium. And even though it shouldn't be the case that dancers get judged on their physical appearance, they do. So
Right.
I figured that if she was someone who would have won Worlds this year if she hadn't turned into a rage monster, I figured she needed at least a 3 in her appearance.
Makes sense.
So this means, though, that Kennedy is not exceptionally bright. So I only have 3 points to put in her mental attributes. And I have perception, intelligence, and wits. The difference between intelligence and wits, like a lot of games, intelligence is book smart. Wits is kind of that combination of quick thinking and cunning and wisdom and that sort of thing.
Trusting your rage gut.
Trusting your rage gut. I considered leaving one of these at 1 and having a 1, 2, 3 spread. But I also knew that really leaves you with a serious weakness. And as I thought about it, it didn't really make sense to me that there were any of these things where Kennedy would be below average. So I gave her just 1 dot in all 3, making her average intelligence, average perception, average cunning, but not below average in any of it.
Right. Kind of just balance that one out as best you could.
Yep. So, the final look at her attributes is that Kennedy is, very graceful, fairly strong and enduring, better looking than average, a little bit better able to manipulate people than average, and perfectly average in all of her mental attributes. So now we move on to abilities. And just like the attributes were broken into 3 columns of physical, social, and mental, abilities are broken into talents, skills, and knowledges. You get a number of points based on prioritizing. In this case, it's 13 points, 9 points, and 5 points.
Do you have to prioritize them in the same manner that you did? So, does it matter on the character sheet that it says physical talents? So therefore, if you took primary physical, you have to take primary talents?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
You do not have to do that. Now, that said, it actually lined up that way for me. But there's absolutely no reason that you have to. A lot of times, skills will be where I end up putting skills will be where I put my primary, and knowledges, and some characters, knowledges are my primary. So there's absolutely no reason you have to prioritize them the same way you did your attributes. I did, but
it just worked out that way for this one. It's not a set in stone rule that you choose these as your primaries. Therefore that becomes your primary the next time through.
And the way I always like to pick my abilities, even before I prioritize, is rather than even think, well, which ones do I want to put more than 1 point into? I just go through and put 1 point into everything that I think is important to the character, and from there kind of prioritize.
Okay.
So when I started looking at this, I started looking at talents, and alertness. Alertness made sense to me as something Kennedy would have. Athletics made sense to me because she's an athletic girl. Brawl, because she gets in fights.
Yep.
Empathy. I wasn't sure about that one, but I also liked the idea that she's not always angry. She is caring. So I put a point there. Expression is the ability to artistically express yourself.
That's perfect.
So obviously I was going to put something there.
Yep.
Intimidation, I ended up putting a point into, but it wasn't something that was part of my initial checklist. Leadership didn't make any sense to me for her. Primal urge is your ability to get in tune with your natural instincts. And I felt like that was something I was probably going to want, especially because I also knew that that's going to affect my ability to change form. So I put a point there.
Yep.
And then subterfuge, the ability to lie. Well, I've never known a teenage girl who wasn't capable of lying to people. And I say this as someone who has 2 teenage daughters. So
speaking from a little bit of experience at the very least.
So like I said, I just went and put 1 dot in everything. I was like, yeah, I'm going to want some of that. So then I looked at abilities and the skills. And animal ken. No, she doesn't seem like the type who spends a lot of time with animals. Craft. No, not really. Drive. Maybe. She's from Dublin. They have as much of a developed public transport system as New York City does. So I didn't think she needed it, but it made sense that she might have a little of it.
True.
Etiquette, it's never bad to know how to be polite to your elders. Sure, I'll put a point there. Firearms, that didn't seem like something she would know. Larceny, which is, the ability to steal and pick locks, that's not her. Melee, well, she usually punches people, but I'm sure at some point she got pissed and picked up a chair and swung it at somebody. So I decided she'd want to rank in melee. Obviously, performance, I knew I was going to want a high rank of performance for her.
Definitely.
So I just went ahead and put 3 dots there because I knew I was going to want to max that one out.
I mean, that speaks to her character in general.
Exactly.
So
that was the core of her concept. And stealth, maybe. Survival, maybe. Probably not. I did end up putting points into stealth, but then I looked at knowledges. I mean, academics, maybe a little. Computers, I mean, she's a 21st century teenager. She knows a little about computers.
Yep.
Enigmas, sure, she pays attention to stories. Investigation, she's not a cop. Law, she's not a lawyer. Medicine, she's not a doctor. Occult, that doesn't make any sense to her. Rituals, why would she know rituals? Science, maybe. Technology, I mean, again, 21st century, most people have at least a little bit in technology.
Know how to use my smartphone.
Exactly. So with these, when I looked at it at this point, it's like, okay, well, in this case, clearly talents are going to end up being her primary, skills are going to be her secondary, and knowledges ended up being her tertiary. So I did end up deciding to give her 1 point in rituals. Part of that was because the way we wrote her backstory, as opposed to everyone else who in our group who had gone through their first change just within weeks of where we're starting the game, her first change happened a couple of months earlier, and she's been living with some people in New York City who have been giving her a little bit deeper background on everything werewolf. And that was partially also something that I worked out with Jonesy because he knew that I knew the background in this way. I could bring some of my knowledge in and help guide the other players and the other characters through the game.
Right.
So I decided to put a point into rituals, not into occult, because I was like, she wouldn't actually believe in like the wider supernatural world, but she paid attention to, oh, this is what werewolves do. Sure. So yeah, knowledge is my tertiary. I got my 5 points real quickly. Talents, I had 13 points. So I put 2 points in alertness, 3 in athletics, 3 in brawl, 2 empathy. Expression had to be high because again, that's dancing.
Yep.
And I think these all add up. 5, 10. Oh, no, got 1 point too many. Okay.
All right.
And then skills. So again, 3 points we're going to go there. I have 9 points here. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'll put 1 more into melee and 1 more into stealth because, sneaking out to go dance and whatnot.
Right.
So these are my abilities. I've got 13 points in my primary, 9 points in my secondary, 5 points in my tertiary.
And none of them are at 4, so you don't get a specialization, basically.
Right. However, again, the performance requires me to actually pick a specialization. Okay. So that's the exception to the rule that proves the rule because, just because you've got 3 points in performance doesn't mean you can sing and you can act and you can dance. So in her case, she does have dance as a specialization for performance.
Okay. So she's really good at that, but ask her to get up for karaoke night and it probably won't go so well.
Exactly. Now, the game system being what it is, I actually would still roll 3 points for performance for karaoke night. I just wouldn't get the benefits of my specialization. So,
makes sense.
Okay. So the next part of the character sheet, moving down after you've got your abilities, is your advantages. So these are, so it's going to scroll past where the Roll20 character sheet has your dice pools. This is just someplace where this character sheet let you preset some of your dice pools so you didn't have to do them on the fly.
Yep.
To use it in Roll20. So you have backgrounds, gifts, and your renown. There's also merits and flaws here, but we'll get back to that because that's actually the last thing you do.
Yep.
So backgrounds define they define things about your character's background. Things like, do you have resources from having had a job? Do you start the game with a fetish, which is a mystical object? Do you have allies who can help you out or contacts? In Kennedy's case, she didn't end up with a lot of background, so it actually was hard for me to end up picking what her backgrounds to start off were going to be. What I ended up going with were kinfolk, which are people who have the werewolf blood but are not werewolves themselves. And that is a recommended background for the Fianna as a tribe because they're big Irish families and close knit. So so you usually, if you have points in kinfolk, you ended up with a network of werewolf blooded people who can help you out. They're probably not going to fight alongside you in battle, but they can do something for you.
Right.
I gave her 2 points in the rites background. So the rituals skill is what you need to actually do rites, but having points in the rites background means you start the game already knowing a few of the specific rituals to the werewolf people. And in this case, I gave her 2 points in rites. And then finally, because I could not think of anything else I wanted to give her for her backgrounds, I gave her 1 point in pure breed, just showing that the werewolf blood is strong in her. In her case, I decided that her father, who she doesn't know, was actually a werewolf himself. In her case, werewolfism wasn't a recessive that activated several generations down the line. It was dad was a werewolf, mom didn't know, dad went and got himself killed, so he was raised by her single mom, getting back to the whole angry Irish dancer girl.
Right.
And the pure breed background will also make it so that when interacting with other werewolves, she'll get a certain amount of respect just for her bloodline.
I gotcha.
All right. So after backgrounds, you have to pick your gifts. Like I said, the gifts, you get 3 to start. 1 from your breed, 1 from your auspice, and 1 from... Where's the gifts on the character sheet? There
they are.
As a Homid, the gifts that I could start with were Apecraft's Blessings, which basically means you're good with technology. City Running, which is basically lets you parkour. Master of Fire, because humans created fire, even though animals are afraid of it, which makes it so that you are somewhat resistant to fire as damage. Persuasion, which just helps you convince people things. And Smell of Man, which lets you use that natural skittishness animals have around humans and amplify it supernaturally. Now, again, because all of us were Homids, we knew we were all going to be picking from this pool of gifts, and we made a choice to kind of try not to overlap here.
Right.
But the one that called to me out of this list was Master of Fire, because I had this vision of her fire dancing, just dancing over a fire and leaping through the flames, and, while everyone else is afraid of the flames, she's just carelessly flying through them without a fear in the world.
Throwing herself to the wind, basically.
Exactly. That sounded like fun to me.
Yeah.
So that was the gift I chose for my Homid. I might have thought about City Running or Persuasion, but we had other people in the group who wanted those gifts. So I was like, that's fine. You take that. We'll have a broader base. And it's still something that made sense to me for her character.
Oh, that was a good thing that you guys had a whole session together when making your pack versus trying to do this individually and then coming to the table.
It really did. And Werewolf, more so than some games, I feel like no game is hurt by having a session 0 where you at least conceptualize your characters together. But for Werewolf, when you are building a pack, I feel like it's probably even more important than in a lot of games. So
yeah, makes sense.
So then I had to pick a gift from her auspice. So as a Galliard, the gifts that she had available were Beast Speech, which would let her talk to animals, Call of the Wild, which lets her howl, go out much further, much longer, Heightened Senses, which is self-obvious,
Mm-hmm.
Mind Speak, which lets you communicate mind to mind with someone else in your pack, or Perfect Recall. And while several of those sounded like they could be fun or could be useful, just something about her personality made me say, no, she would want to be loud. So even though I kind of personally felt like Call of the Wild is arguably the least useful of those gifts, it was the one that just made the most sense to me for her character.
Oh, that's a great thing too, is that it doesn't matter that it's less useful as long as it fit the character background.
Yep.
Character concept.
I also knew that it's not hard to learn more gifts in the game as you go through, so I wasn't too worried about picking one early on that would later on be suboptimal.
Right.
But, there's always that, it's like, well, I could try to build the most effective character, or I could play a concept and really have fun with it. And
yep.
I'd rather play a concept and have fun with it.
That's definitely a lot more fun than just playing a bag of stats.
Yep. And then finally, I had to pick a gift based on my tribe. And the Galliard or the Fianna gifts were Fairy Light, which lets you kind of make Will-o'-the-Wisps. Hare's Leap, which lets you leap really high, which I looked at that, I was like, oh, that could be fun, could go well with the Master of Fire thing. Mm-hmm. Persuasion, again. Two Tongues, which it's a weird one, it lets you carry on two conversations at the same time. So you can kind of like be saying something to an adversary while you're telling your pack, hey, this is what I'm actually doing.
Oh, okay.
But the one that just hit me as I had no choice was Resist Toxin, which you can make yourself completely immune to mundane toxins and resistant to supernatural ones. And it's one you can turn on and off at will. In other words, it's the Irish ability to drink and not be hungover and to
oh man, there you go.
Right? And, if for no other reason, then I would love to have that gift personally. I just said, no, that's what she has to have. And also it fit into kind of how I saw her. She was a party girl. She would go out and drink hard. And then the next morning she'd go dance as if she hadn't been drinking.
Right. So
those were the gifts that I started off with. And then the last thing to pick was my Renown. Renown is how your character goes up in rank in Werewolf Society. And your starting Renown is based off of your auspice. The types of Renown are Glory, Honor, and Wisdom. Mm-hmm. And you need to get certain amounts of each of those before you can move up to the next rank. Your rank in the game will let you buy higher level gifts and higher level, just higher level abilities. It also, you get respect. If you are a rank 3 werewolf, the rank 1 werewolf who sees you walk by is going to go, that guy is important. I need to give him deference. So as a Galliard, I started off with 2 points of glory and 1 point of wisdom. So I didn't have a lot. I didn't have anything I had to choose there. Mm-hmm. Then my rage started at 4 because of my auspice. Mm-hmm. My gnosis started at 1 because of my breed, and my willpower started at 3 because of my tribe. Most tribes start with 3 willpower. 1 or 2 of them have 2. 1 or 2 of them start at 4. But most of the tribes start you off with 3 willpower.
Okay.
And anyone who is worried about it, I always tell them, don't worry about the willpower when you're determining your tribe. Pick your tribe based on the concept and let the willpower come with it. So then the last thing that you get to do are merits and flaws and freebie points. And this is where you get a little bit of ability to customize your character and start off with things higher than these initial starting ranks. So you get 15 freebie points, although they're not a strict one-for-one spending. Like it costs 5 freebie points to raise one of your attributes a point. It costs 2 freebie points to raise one of your abilities a point. But you also get the ability to take merits and flaws. Merits are those little intangibles that make characters different, might give you an advantage, but they're not really their own skill or their own supernatural power in their own right. So a lot of games have something like this. Like in Pathfinder, it would kind of be like your feats. I know Savage Worlds has something similar, although I've never played Savage Worlds, so I don't know exactly what it is in Savage Worlds. But I've looked at the character sheet, so I know it exists. And again, there's a lot of merits. There's a lot of flaws. I'm not going to go through all of those because that's
a whole other video.
That would be a whole other video. But I will say that what I ending up with for Kennedy was I gave her 2 1-point merits. I gave her concentration, which is the ability to focus your mind and shut out distractions or annoyances. And that will let me make... So if we're trying to do something and Jonesy says, well, the difficulty would normally be 6, but because there's gunfire and people fighting and everything, I'm making the difficulty 8. Well, in Kennedy's case, she can focus everything else out and she can go, no, just give me what the actual difficulty is. I don't get distracted.
Right. Makes sense for a dancer.
Made sense for a world championship dancer, especially Irish dance. They do it where there's 3 people dancing on stage at the same time. There's other stages dancing at the same time. There's lots of different music. And I'm like, I don't know how my daughter does that and just the music that it matters for her. So I was like, no. There's no way that that. Yeah. And the other one I gave her was perfect balance, which I think that one is self-explanatory.
Yep. That also makes sense.
Yep. But then I wanted to give her a couple of flaws to balance them out. So I gave her impatient. The things that she's focused on, but otherwise she ends up getting antsy and like, can we just move on and do the thing already?
Yes.
I gave her another flaw, which is persistent parents, which means that her mom they told her mom that she died in the same thing that killed her friends that, who she woke up in the alleyway filled with their blood. Mom doesn't believe it. So mom is still looking for her.
Ooh.
And that will probably come back to bite us at some point in the campaign. I get points for it during character creation, but I'm giving Jonesy a tool to come and stab me in the back later in the game.
Right.
And finally, I gave her an enemy. Because a little bit more of the backstory of what happened to her in that alley was she and her friends were out walking, trying to see New York City before the competition started.
Yep.
Ducked into an alley to take a few drinks from the flask before moving on. And then someone walked in and said, she doesn't want you to dance, and attacked us.
Ooh.
And that was what triggered her first change. Now, Kennedy has no idea who she was. And yeah, the people who attacked us are dead, but I'm sure they were just underlings. I'm sure she is still out there.
Right. She didn't show up to finish you off. She sent other people.
Exactly. I have some ideas, and I gave Jonesy some suggestions for who she might have been, but I don't really know who it is. It's kind of up to him to, at some point, do something with that.
The magic GM reveal.
Exactly. And again, those are fun. It's fun to give your GM those kind of tools to stab you in the back later on. So Her enemy was worth 3 points. The persistent parents was worth 2 points, and her impatient flaw was 1. So I had 6 points of flaws and 2 points of merits. So that gave me an extra 4 freebie points for building my character.
Okay.
And when I was building, so when I took those freebie points, that's where I started just kind of filling things in around. I didn't touch my attributes because that's a lot of points.
Yes.
But I did increase my, what did I increase? I increased my primal urge to 2. I increased my dance, my performance, up to 4.
Does that give you a second specialization?
It does not. It just means that if performance wasn't already something that could be specialized, I would now have been able to. But also, it just gives me a really good dice pool for doing a dance competition.
Yep.
The other thing I used my freebie points on was I wanted to build up my rage and my gnosis and my willpower because I know how important those are. So that's where I put the rest of my freebie points. I increased my rage up to 6. I increased my gnosis up to 3. And I took my willpower up to 6. And that was what I did with all of my freebie points. I could have used it to either buy more merits or give myself more backgrounds, or, you know, I could have put more points into brawl or melee. If I'd wanted, I could have put something into one of my attributes and, you know, taken my dexterity up to 5. But that was where I put my freebie points. The nice thing about the freebie points is those are really where you get the most customization. You know, right. Everyone gets 753 for attributes and 1395 for abilities. But then where you put those freebies, that's entirely up to you. So
perfect. Cool.
And that's basically everything that went into building her. So
awesome. Well, Aaron, thank you very much for running us through how you made Kennedy. For those of you that are interested in seeing Kennedy in action, Born of Rage is streaming on our Twitch channel, which we'll link down below, on Monday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern, that is. So videos will be up on YouTube later in the week, or you can view them on Twitch as well. So for us here at Storyforge, if you like what you saw, hit the like button and the bell to get notified when we put up a new video, and leave us a comment below. Thank you for watching.